In a previous video, we talked about the IRS cracking down on small online sellers with a new $600 threshold rule. There were a lot of questions about this, and I also saw quite a few misconceptions. So I am bringing in another expert to break this all down. Welcome to the Sewing Report. I'm Jen, and this channel is all about making sewing and crafts fun and approachable. We're going to be doing another business-related video, this one aimed at Etsy sellers and anyone with a small online business. So I'm really excited to introduce Mark Tew, CPA, and you may know him on the internet as Not Your Dad's CPA. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Quick disclaimer before we get into things, this conversation is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This does not constitute any type of accounting, financial, legal, or business advice. Please advise a qualified professional in your area. I gotta get this out of the way. I know your branding is Not Your Dad's CPA. I would be totally cool with a dad CPA. I don't know. You do have some dad vibes though, and I think that's a good thing. So I just wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
So you are a CPA. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and your YouTube channel, which focuses on accounting and business finance.
Yeah, so just real quick, my background is I started in public accounting, did some time in corporate finance, and I was a CPA, and I just decided that I should go ahead and try doing the CPA thing. I started doing a little bit of tax on the side, preparing people's taxes, and that just sort of grew until eventually, I found myself doing a lot of taxes for people who were selling on Etsy, Amazon, eBay, online sellers. I got into online selling a little bit myself. And after a while, I just decided, I think this is a really good niche. I just want to make this my specialty. So for the past, 5-6 years, I've just really been focusing on online businesses, online resellers. And that's what I do. And I started my YouTube channel about a year and a half ago now. And that's starting to get some traction. I'm starting to enjoy it more. So I just like connecting with people and helping them virtually online.
It's pretty interesting because I've noticed this trend lately on YouTube of professionals coming to the platform. There's accountants, lawyers, all kinds of folks helping people out with more everyday adult stuff. And I think YouTube has really grown up from the time that it was like animal videos and like prank stuff. Now you get some very, serious people. I help a realtor with her channel. And it's interesting just to see the shift from more like frivolous entertainment related content. But now some of these business and finance channels are just totally blowing up. So that's really cool. And I think that's good because this kind of content really helps people versus, some videos are just for fun. But a lot of people are looking for answers to questions. So you did a video about a month ago, and we both did videos on this topic, that the IRS has a new threshold starting this year, 2022, where any online payment processor like Etsy, PayPal, Venmo, they're going to be required to report any combined transactions of $600 or more in a calendar year to the IRS. So your video was titled pretty cleverly, you're like, no more, basically it was like no more flying under the radar. So can you explain this new rule? And we know that was part of the 2021, was it the American Rescue Plan Act, something like that. So explain what it is. And also, tell us like why did you decide to do a video on that? I think it got like, it's now at almost 300,000 views. Were you surprised at that?
I was pretty surprised. I just thought it was kind of like another random topic that just as I think of things, I'll make a video about it. I just thought it was going to be like another video that got a couple thousand views and that was the end of it. I kind of just thought it was not a big deal. But it blew up on my channel, at least relative to the rest of my videos. And in the comment sections, you just get such a wide variety of opinions. Yeah, strong opinions. But yeah, basically, so historically, the payment processors such as PayPal, now eBay managed payments, or like whoever is processing payments, Stripe, they have been required to send people who process more than $20,000 worth of transactions through their platform, they've been required to send them a form, and that's the 1099-K form. So if you exceed that threshold of $20,000 and 200 transactions, this is 2021 and prior, you would get this form, and the IRS would receive a record of that as well. So then if you didn't report that income, or if the IRS didn't see that income on your tax return that was reported to them, they could then follow up with you by sending you a letter and say, hey, we didn't see this on your tax form, and we calculate that you owe an additional X amount of tax because you didn't report this.
Now, we were talking about this before we started taping, but neither of us really knows the origins of this new rule, or like how it came to be, what politicians made this decision, and why it was in something called the American Rescue Plan Act. Because I think there's been a lot of backlash about this, and a lot of people do not feel like this is helping American people. So it's pretty interesting because it was in a plan that was supposed to help people during the pandemic. And a lot of folks, especially these smaller online sellers, there's a lot of very upset people that do not like this new rule. Have you gotten a lot of like responses? I know I was looking at your video, and a lot of the comments are pretty negative about this.
Yeah. So, I mean, the thing is, even the big misconception is that if you don't receive that 1099 form, that you don't have to pay taxes on it. But the reality is that any profit, not necessarily income, but any profit that you make selling stuff online, or really in any small business, you're going to owe tax on that. But people thought, oh, I didn't get a 1099, so I don't have to report this.
That's what we wanted to clarify too, is that whether or not you get a 1099 from a company like Etsy or eBay or Amazon, that's not connected in any way to whether or not you're supposed to report and pay taxes on income, right?
Yeah. So the people who are really upset about it, or are in a way sort of self-identifying by, saying I wasn't paying tax on this, and now I'm mad that the IRS is going to know about it, be able to pinpoint me if I don't, kind of thing. So if you were already paying tax, even if you were below the threshold, the fact that they lowered the threshold, which is what they did, they lowered it from 20,000 down to 600, that shouldn't really impact you if you were already reporting it. So, but yeah, there's a lot of people out there who didn't know that they were supposed to report it. And there are some people who were consciously flying under the radar who will now no longer be able to do that. So, yeah, it is kind of interesting. But yeah, I mean, the government is spending a lot of money, and it doesn't just come from nowhere. They have certain levers that they can move, and this is one that they decided to pull on, and it affects a lot of small business owners who maybe, I don't know, don't like it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm seeing a lot of comments online, like on videos like this, or I lurk a lot on Reddit. I don't really comment because it's very scary there. But a lot of folks are like, hey, I've been doing this as a hobby on the side just for extra grocery money. But if I have to report this income, track my expenses, pay an accountant, or get like a bookkeeping service like QuickBooks or something, I'm out because it's not worth it. From what I'm seeing, it does seem like this is really going to kind of knock out a lot of those lower level sellers that may only do $600 or $1,000 a year, because they're going to be like, this is just not worth it. Like if they were making $1,000 income, but not really having to do that, it kind of makes sense. But it's not making a lot of sense now to a lot of people who are not high volume sellers. So it's pretty interesting to see all the comments like that.
Yeah, I mean, I have seen those comments, and people are like, if this is how it's going to be, then I'm done. I mean, I would want to explain a little bit to those people that it doesn't necessarily have to be that big of a burden. I mean, I encourage people all the time just to get a separate bank account, maybe get a really simple bookkeeping system, or at least a spreadsheet, just to track. I mean, if you only have a few transactions, it's not going to be that difficult to put together a picture of your total income, your total expenses or costs, and then just take a few extra minutes to list that out on your tax return at tax time. So I guess I would encourage them to at least try it out for a year or two before they just quit, because it could turn into something bigger. It could turn into, a more profitable business that it ends up growing, and you don't want to just throw that away.
That's a good point. And what a lot of people don't realize too is that even if Etsy issues a 1099K for say $1,200, you probably have a lot of business expenses that would be deducted. So your total profit might be $200, and then you might owe like $30 in taxes. So that gross number isn't the total net profit. And that's just what you need to be able to prove to the IRS. And then in many cases, you may be paying more taxes than you need to be because you haven't been keeping track of all your expenses. Right off the bat, what do you tell people that are in this situation? Like first steps, what should they do from here on out? if they're in this situation where they maybe haven't been reporting things or filing, where do you go from here?
Yeah, I mean, there's only so much you can do as far as prior periods, as far as trying to put together that picture of your income and expenses. So let's say last year you didn't keep any records. I would just say, well, the goal is to put together like a simple profit and loss statement. So you want your total sales for the year on the top, and then your cost of goods sold and your other, office expenses, all that stuff to yield your profit or loss. So to get your sales, if you were selling on Etsy, I think you can go to Etsy and pull a report of your total sales for the year. And then for your different costs, I mean, you might have to reference receipts that you might still have on hand. You might have to go through old bank statements or credit card statements. If you had cash transactions, you might just have to, I mean, the IRS doesn't really like estimates, but worst case scenario, I still think you should maybe estimate those costs. But then as far as going forward, yeah, the first thing I would encourage someone to do is just get a separate bank account. It doesn't necessarily have to be a business account. It could be a separate personal checking account that you link your business transactions to. And that way you'll have all that stuff there, separate from your personal. Even if you don't have any other bookkeeping system, that'll put you so much further ahead.
Now I have separate business accounts for all of my business stuff. What is the benefit to that? And what are some of the consequences if you commingle all your finances?
Even if you don't think you're not a business, if you're like, well, this is just personal stuff, so it's not taxed. The IRS doesn't see it that way. They see you as a sole proprietor. That's your business entity by default. And as a sole proprietor, there's no legal distinction between that business entity and you. It's kind of the same thing. So, and that's why I say you can have a separate personal checking account. But then the next step, if you want to be maybe like a step above in terms of legitimacy and liability protection, you would do it like an LLC. And in that case, you would want a separate business account because that's where the liability protection comes into play. Because if you're just if you're commingling your funds in that case, if somebody ever came after you from a legal standpoint, they could say, well, look at how you're operating your business. You're not even treating it like a business because you're commingling your funds and that kind of thing. And they might be able to do what's called pierce the corporate veil, which means bypass that liability protection and come after your personal assets rather than being limited to your business assets only. And I'm not an attorney, but that's kind of how it works. That's the idea behind it.
That's a good thing to bring up because I did get a few questions on at what point you should register a business. And there are a lot of people, particularly on Etsy, that consider it more of a hobby, whereas the IRS might consider it a business. So how do you make that distinction, and what should people know about the hobby versus business factor?
Yeah, so there is a difference tax-wise between a hobby and a business, but being a hobby doesn't mean that you don't owe tax either. It's actually typically going to be less beneficial for you to operate as a hobby because you're not allowed to take most of the deductions. Like you can't claim your expenses as deductions. So you actually are incentivized to be a business because then you claim your income and you can deduct most of your expenses as deductions to yield a lower taxable profit. So I would say you definitely do want to be a business because you have to report the income either way. It's going to be more beneficial tax-wise.
This is a question I've been getting pretty frequently is people want to know at what point should I go through the hoops, maybe register as a business and go through all those, legalities versus maybe I just want to try to sell a few things on Facebook. Do you have any advice for people in the very beginning stages of that sort of business venture as to when they should do that or if they need to?
Yeah, I would say typically just start. I mean, it obviously depends on your individual circumstance, but most of the businesses in the United States anyway are sole proprietorships. Like that's what you are by default. And if you're selling crafts or shoes or clothing online or something, those are typically not businesses that are very high risk or high liability, litigious, that kind of thing. So you're probably fine. If you have a lot of personal assets that you want to protect, or if you're in some type of industry that is a little bit higher risk, then an LLC would be a good idea because that's the main benefit. It gives you liability protection. Or sometimes, like I work with a lot of resellers who work with wholesalers and vendors, and sometimes those wholesalers or vendors won't work with you unless you are an LLC. So that's another reason you might want to kind of, step up your legitimacy in their eyes. And then the last reason I like mentioning is if you want to ever have an S corp, which does have some real tax benefits, you first have to have an LLC or another entity in place first. It's like a stepping stone.
I did get a question about Zelle, and I'd seen in some articles that Zelle was being included in the $600 threshold, but then I saw some information that it's not because it's apparently a bank transfer versus an online payment processor. Are you seeing anything like that? Because that was an interesting thing that a lot of media outlets were saying Zelle was included, but I'm seeing that it might not be.
Yeah, so my understanding is that it is not. I don't know what the technical difference is, but the payment processors who are subject to that requirement of sending a 1099, so they're called payment settlement entities, I think, PSEs. I guess Zelle is not one. If you look on their website, they say that they're not subject to the requirement. So that's pretty much all I know, that they're not going to be sending 1099s. Because I think you're right. It is mainly bank transfers. It's typically not used for to remit payment for the sale of goods and services. So I think, they're not subject to that.
And let's be real here. I think the reason people are asking is that folks are looking for some loopholes. What kind of advice would you give to people that may be trying to get around these rules and sort of still be under the radar? Is that a good idea? Is that something they should avoid?
Yeah, I mean, it's not technically correct. If you're doing business, you can still probably use Venmo personal rather than Venmo business, or you can use PayPal friends and family rather than PayPal business. But I think they'll probably put in place more controls to try and track that stuff. Like if they see a lot of high volume transactions coming through those, my guess is they might shut it down. I think they might already do that. I don't know what to say. It's definitely
you as a CPA, you probably can't advise people to do that, I'm guessing.
I would not advise it. You're right.
No, so you probably have to keep your answers pretty PC here. So we totally get it. And the other thing is that I want to talk about using all cash as a business. Now, I talked about this with another bookkeeper about people who are going to just try to use cash and no electronic stuff. Any caveats or, maybe warnings about trying to operate your business that way?
I mean, there's no problem with doing it unless you're doing it specifically because you're trying to evade taxes, which that's the IRS doesn't take that lightly.
I can see how they wouldn't. So there are certain risks with that as well. And the other thing Sarah Cornick had pointed out is that if your business is not on paper, you have no business finances. She said one of her clients was having trouble getting a mortgage because on paper she had no income. So that was a pretty interesting point to bring up, I think. And then you have no, say you're trying to make your business bigger or anything, you have no records of your income because it's all done under the table. So under the table business can have its own downsides as well.
Can definitely have its challenges, that's for sure.
Without doxing people, have you had clients in those situations before?
Not too much. I mean, I have had people sort of test the waters by asking me can I just not report these deductions or because I'm trying to boost my income so I can get a mortgage, and then I'll just amend my tax return and claim that deduction again and reduce my taxes. And that's not okay.
All right, that's good to know. Good to know. And what are some of the common mistakes you're seeing small business owners make with their finances or taxes? What are some things you see all the time?
Yeah, I mean, one of them is exactly what we're talking about, just failing to report your online income because you didn't get a 1099. So I'll get a new client who that happened to the prior year. They didn't report it, but then they're sending me the letter that they got from the IRS that's imposing a bunch of new taxes for that income that wasn't reported. So then we have to go back and amend the return and report that income and also report all their deductions. That's something I see quite frequently. And I mean, the other one is just not keeping good records. So again, whether you have just a simple spreadsheet or even a pencil and paper, as long as you are doing some kind of system that works for you to keep track of your business activity, your transactions, that's really going to help you as a business owner just be in tune with what is going on in your business, with your business profitability, and it's going to also facilitate your tax preparation experience.
So is this something you feel like a lot of small online sellers might be able to handle themselves, or would you recommend talking to a professional, especially if it's for the first time? What do you think is the best way to go?
Yeah, it could be either. I think it just depends on your comfort level. Some people are comfortable with spreadsheets, comfortable with numbers, are really detail oriented. And I see a lot of those types of people do a pretty good job. Yeah, like if TurboTax can be fine, like the tax program, any of that stuff can be fine. But if you get TurboTax and you're doing it yourself and you find yourself sweating is asking you, what was your beginning inventory, or what was your home office square footage? And you're just like, oh, why is it asking me this? What if I mess up? If you're really anxious about it, that might be an indicator that, having somebody help you at least that first year might be really beneficial.
And I can say from personal experience, so I've done both. I've taken my taxes to H&R Block, and then I've also done it myself online. I would say even H&R Block charges like with all of the fees and everything, doing it myself was like $300, and then hiring a CPA was $500. In my opinion, it was worth it to spend the extra $200 and not have to do it myself. So that's just my own personal recommendation. Because that's the thing, it's like when you go to the grocery store and you have self-checkout, I can, if I have to do this taxes myself for $300 or get someone to do all the work for $500, I feel like there's definitely some value there. So that's my own opinion. So another thing I do want to ask you about is the thing where people are wondering if they're just selling old stuff on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace or whatever. How do you tell the IRS that's not a business transaction? That's just you getting rid of old stuff. What do you do in that situation?
Yeah, that's, sort of a flaw in the system right now, because if you are selling it on eBay, that income is going to be included in your 1099 number. So what you're going to have to do is just make sure that you include it as income on your tax return, but you're also going to deduct the cost of that item. And the challenge there is you might not remember what the original cost was. Yeah, in that case, you'll just have to use your best estimate of either the original cost, or if the market value is lower, then you might have to use that. And I have a video on that gets more into that detail, but it's not an exact science. So that might help you feel a little bit more comfortable with the uncertainty around that.
Yeah, that can be tricky, especially if something's 20 years old, you probably, let's be real, you don't have a receipt for that. Or if it's something maybe you were given, like your grandma's old stuff or something, who knows with these things? It can just get so complicated. All right, so I got a couple questions here that I thought were pretty good from viewers. Okay, as an LLC, can we make investments in the products to sell in the future, like buying Legos? And I believe Legos do have a depreciating value. So they're asking if they can, buy stuff with the understanding it's going to gain value over time, I think.
Yeah, for sure. You can do that.
All right, cool. All right. This is interesting. Oh, and later on, we'll talk about sales tax a little bit more. If I buy at a thrift store and pay their sales tax, remake the clothes and sell them, do you also have to charge sales tax?
Yeah, you might not. Sales tax has to be charged, but you might not have to do it, because most of the platforms, like if you sell on Etsy or Poshmark or eBay, they're going to charge that sales tax on your behalf and remit it on your behalf. So yeah, but even though you paid it already, so you can deduct that just as the overall cost. That the sales tax that you pay becomes part of the cost of the item that you can deduct.
So cost of goods. I've seen this. I joined your Facebook groups. I've seen a lot of talk about Cogs. All right, and the same person asks. They're an upcycler. Customers provide the shirts and I remake them. Are you supposed to be charging sales tax? So I guess this would be more of a service, because like one guy I know, he gets like vintage clothes, cuts them up, and then kind of remakes them into something else. That's an interesting one.
That's a good question. If you're selling a product, typically the sale, it'll be subject to sales tax. But then most services, I think states might be taxing more services now, but in general, services are not as much subject to sales tax.
Because where I am, I believe there's certain services that do have tax. Like I do video production work for someone and there's no sales tax. But if I gave this client even like a flash drive, a physical item, then I have to charge sales tax on the entire transaction. So you just have to make sure to keep everything digital. Like a photographer wouldn't have to charge sales tax. But if they included a photo album, then they would. So there's a lot of rules, and I guess it differs per state. But I thought that was an interesting question. Here's one about reporting now. And I was going to ask you this about registering with the IRS and paying estimated quarterly taxes. One person wanted to know, does everyone need to do this? What situations should you, and maybe you don't have to, like, say you have a 9-to-5 job and then you have a side business too. So like, are there certain situations you would say yes to filing the quarterly stuff or no?
Yeah. So when you are self-employed, the IRS kind of wants you, well, not kind of, they want you to remit your taxes throughout the year rather than waiting till the end of the year. But if you also have a W-2 job, you are having federal taxes remitted throughout the year through your paycheck. So one thing you could do is just increase the withholdings that you're having taking out of your paycheck, or maybe a spouse's paycheck. And that could potentially cover the additional tax that's due from your side hustle or your self-employment income job. Or yeah, you could just make manual estimated payments throughout the year in addition to what's already being withheld from your paycheck. So in how much you remit or how much you pay is just going to depend on how much tax you're going to owe at the end of the year.
So if someone does not have a regular job they can do that with, should they pretty much always be doing the quarterly stuff?
Yeah, depending on how much tax they're going to owe and depending, yeah, there's all these different factors like how much tax you're going to owe for this year, but you might not have to worry about it depending on your prior year tax liability. So it just depends on your situation.
Man, why are taxes so complicated, Mark?
It's crazy.
I know it keeps guys like you in business, so I get it. But it just seems like things are never easy to understand. They change year to year, and then everyone's all confused. So that's why I think your channel is a good thing to be on YouTube. Okay, so let's talk about sales tax, because I was getting some questions on the video I did where people were mistaking the sales tax Etsy collects and remits with income tax, which is definitely different. Yes, some platforms will collect and remit the sales tax, but none of these platforms will withhold income tax, right?
Yeah, so totally separate things. Income tax is what we think of when we think of doing your taxes every year that are due on April 15th. And we typically think of the IRS. So that's the federal income tax. And depending on your state, you might also have state income tax. And then sales tax is kind of off in its own category. And that's driven by, what you're actually selling, your gross sales number versus your profit, which is what your federal income tax is based on.
So for folks out there, no, Etsy does not collect and withhold the income tax for you. So you guys have to keep track of that. That's why Mark is here. Keep track of your finances. Make sure you're reporting this income, paying taxes on it. Because next year, do you feel like you're going to get a flood of business next year? Are you bracing yourself?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's going to be a lot of surprised sellers who still really don't know what's coming. They're not even expecting to have to pay taxes on it. There's gonna be a lot of surprise when people get these 1099s. Yeah, it'll be it'll be I think there'll be a whole new influx of people reporting self-employment.
Just out of curiosity, you've posted some stuff on your Instagram stories. You've been getting flooded with messages and in emails and stuff. Are you noticing some common themes as far as the panic goes?
It's kind of the same things that I'm used to seeing, but maybe just a little bit more of it. There's just a lot of misconceptions surrounding getting audited.
You had one person that said they couldn't sleep at night because they got a letter from the IRS saying they were probably going to get audited. But then you posted a follow-up saying this really isn't a big deal. So what happens when you do get audited, and how do you deal with it if somebody faces that situation?
Yeah, I mean, this lady sent me an email, and that was really a perfect example of what I talk about sometimes, which is people literally lose sleep because of their anxiety about taxes. I mean, she was saying that she would sit out the window and look out the window and hope the FBI wasn't coming to her door or something. So that's kind of on the extreme end. But I had her send me a letter of the audit notice that she got. And it was what I expected, which is they typically say, hey, you've been selected for an audit. We want to look at these 2 or these 3 categories. And in her case, they wanted to look at total gross receipts, medical expenses, and office expenses. So 1 was personal and 2 related to her business. And all you have to do in that situation is submit basically a detail that show the the detail behind the numbers that you claimed on your taxes, and then the audit goes away. I mean, it could really be just, one or two interactions by mail, and then that's it. It's not somebody coming to your house and just,
you're not going to get arrested or taken away to debtor's prison or anything like that. So it's done like snail mail, not like electronically. I always wondered what happens when you get audited. Not that I want an audit, but please, IRS, if you're watching this, please, I'm good. I'm good, man.
Yep. They're still a few years behind. It's all by mail. So if somebody emails you or calls you, that's a high risk indicator of, might not be the IRS.
So you have to literally physically mail everything in? It's crazy.
Yeah. Sometimes they let you fax.
Or like, there's no like website where you can upload documents or anything. That seems so technologically outdated. I don't know. Is that the way the IRS rolls? Pretty
much.
Have you worked directly with people at the IRS in the past with clients? Like, what was it like?
Not really. I actually, there are some firms who will call the IRS a lot on behalf of their clients. I try to avoid that as much as possible, just because it takes so long. I think I was on hold for like 4 hours the last time I tried to call them, just being passed around and trying to get something done.
So you're okay. So a typical government type response. Okay, so or like any corporate, like when you call a credit card company and then you talk to the AI for a while and then your whole day has gone by. Do you have any tips for small business owners on how to maybe avoid audits or maybe like avoid red flags that the IRS might see?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of audits are just randomly selected. So that's not something you can necessarily avoid, but then
like jury duty. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's some of them, but then there is a portion also that are, if they see something that looks way out of the norm, you might be flagged for an audit. That's not the case with things like people are like, well, I can't show a loss because then I'll get audited, or I can't claim the home office deduction because then I'll get audited. Those things are not red flags. Like businesses have losses all the time. Millions of people are eligible for and claim the home office deduction. Like that stuff is, if you have a legitimate expense that you can claim as a deduction, you should absolutely do it. Don't forego the opportunity to claim a deduction just because you think you're going to get audited.
That is very good to know. Another point of confusion has been that there was some talk about lowering the threshold for banks reporting transactions. Like currently, I believe it's $10,000. And then there was talk about $600, but that went away. So a lot of people were confusing those two things because they were both for $600. But have you heard the latest on the bank reporting?
No, but yeah, that is a good point that people were confusing those two things a lot.
I got kind of an angry comment. They're like, they were telling me I was wrong. And they're like, that hasn't been passed yet. And that's for banks. I'm like, no, they're two separate things. This $600 IRS threshold for online payment processors is definitely in effect. There's no talk of that. The bank thing was a totally separate issue, but I think because they were for the same dollar amount, people conflated them and thought they were the same thing. But will it have an impact if the United States decides to lower that $10,000 threshold? Because now all bank activity will be tracked below a certain amount, because that'll be interesting.
Yeah, I don't know how that would work. I mean, because then the banks would have to report transactions above a certain amount that hits your bank, even if they're not necessarily income. So yeah, I don't know. And the other thing that people confuse a little bit too is, if I pay a contractor over $600 during the year, I'm supposed to send them a 1099. It's a 1099 NEC, non-employee compensation form. But that's another one that people are confusing with this other $600 threshold that with online payment platforms.
Let's be real. People are very confused about taxes. And also, I did get some questions about what people need to do when they actually file their taxes. And I know you've talked about this a lot on your channel, but they need to file, usually it's like a Schedule C, right? Along with their regular tax stuff.
Yeah, if you're using a program to prepare your taxes, it'll walk you through that and automatically fill out that form. But that's what it is. It's just it's a separate schedule of your individual tax return. So it's a Schedule C of your individual Form 1040.
Man, well, this year is going to be a trip, I think, Mark. Is there anything we have not talked about yet that you think might be helpful for this audience to know about?
I think we've touched on a lot of the important areas. Just making sure you keep good records, talked about estimated taxes. I think one of the biggest things to remember is just it's usually not as complicated maybe as you think it is, or maybe not as serious. Like you're not going to go to jail. There's not as much reason to panic as you might think.
Okay, yeah, it's like when you see, and that's the thing, when you see stories about people getting arrested for this type of thing, that's a pretty extreme example. You don't hear about all of the very normal situations because that's not exciting. So you don't see your local media reporting on all the people that did their taxes right or just had a small penalty. And in a lot of these situations, it does seem like, yeah, you might have to pay a penalty if you got something wrong, but you're not going to go to prison or anything like that. So it's not anything super scary. All right, so let's talk about your platforms. Now, you've been really busy lately, and I know tax season is coming up. If let's bring up your YouTube channel. So Mark is at Not Your Dad's CPA, and he has tons of videos about all things tax and business related. So if your question has not been answered, I would definitely recommend you check out Mark's channel. Mark, what are some good ways if people want to learn more from you? What kind of stuff? Where can you point them if they want to get more Mark and Not Your Dad's CPA?
Yeah, so definitely my YouTube channel. I have a Facebook group called Accounting for Online Sellers that you can join. And there's a pretty helpful community we have in there who will answer your questions. I'm in there a lot. And then I also have a tax course that focuses on online businesses, online resellers. That's called Reseller Tax Academy. And it's really just about helping you to do all the things you need to do throughout the year that are going to optimize your tax situation. Because there's only so much that can be done if it's tax time and you haven't been doing those things. So yeah, that's typically where I will point people who want to get pointed in the right direction.
Yeah, very cool. And I also noticed you do a lot of Q&A live streams. So subscribe to the channel and follow Not Your Dad's CPA on Facebook, because you do the live streams, I think, in both places. So if you have some questions that you think Mark could answer. Yeah, and your course looks pretty cool. I was looking, and you do have some promotions every once in a while. So sometimes the course is on sale. What kind of things will people learn in the Reseller Tax Academy? Like just kind of basic business stuff?
Yeah, I mean, what types of tax we're subject to, all about different deductions that you should know as an online business, how to clean up a tax mess.
I'm sure you've probably gotten a few of those.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole module kind of on the bookkeeping and accounting foundation piece, because if you don't have that in order, then there's really not a lot you can do. I mean, you got to have that solid foundation that you can build on with the tax piece. I tell people it's kind of like if you don't brush your teeth all year and then you go to the dentist, like there's only so much work, there's only so much they can do to minimize the damage. But if you're doing all the stuff you need to do throughout the year, brushing, flossing, all that stuff, you're in a much better position from a tax perspective at the end of the year. Like those savings will already be sort of in place for you to take advantage of.
Then it makes tax time pretty pain-free.
Exactly.
If you do all those things. Well, thank you so much for being with us. And I'm going to link all of Mark's socials and website down below in the description box. I do think your stuff looks really cool. And you also have a reseller business starter guide that people can download for free. So you have a lot of free resources. I do want to just warn people, Mark's been really busy, so I might avoid like trying to DM him on Instagram or emailing him directly. Try to join one of his live streams or take the Tax Academy, because I did notice on your website you said you were all booked up for like tax consultations, right? So you've been pretty slammed.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I am like selectively accepting clients for tax preparation, that kind of thing. But my one-on-one consultations, I do close those down during tax season for the most part. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy to help where I can.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much. And guys, feel free to leave some comments below. Again, if you have questions, though, I would encourage you to go over to Mark's socials and show him some love. And also, because I obviously cannot answer your tax questions here. That's why I had an expert on. But thank you guys so much for watching. And if you haven't checked them out yet, I also did another interview with a different small business bookkeeper, small business Sarah. And I also did a video about my own Etsy shop and everything I had to do to get started. So check out that video as well. I'm Jen with the Sewing Report. I'll see you guys again in the next video. Remember, whatever you're doing, make it fun.